Okay, time for some know your numbers spreadsheet madness here. I like spreadsheets to track my numbers, so I'm going to go over real quick here what we got going on in the flatbed market. This is DAT's analytics. They're the ones I follow most of the time. So if you go to dat.com, you do not need a subscription for this. You can just go to their website and you go to their resources, blogs, and every week they give an update on all three equipment types. We're looking at flatbed today, and so we click over here. And I haven't watched this video yet. They update every Tuesday, so shame on me. I should have watched that. But this is the heat map that they give every week, and the most important thing that I look for is right down here, the rolling 7-day line haul average, which is reporting at 217 per mile for flatbed. This is excluding loads 550 miles and lower. So short loads are excluded. 550 and above are included in this 217 or $2.17 dollars per mile. So that's kind of what I look at to try to benchmark my rates, making sure I'm keeping up with the market. And so let's dive into some spreadsheet stuff. What I'm looking at here is I'm going to be looking at my last hitch. So my last round trip. Here's the numbers. Here's all my numbers. I probably ought to make a spreadsheet that's a little easier to understand, but this is easy to understand for me because this has been a spreadsheet that I've been adjusting and moving for quite a few years. So it makes sense to me, but it's probably all jumbled up for you guys. So what we're looking at here, some highlights. We've got total fuel price, total fuel gallons, total DEF price, total DEF gallons. And we've got 29 days of work on the road. I was home. I was off one day. And then we have 11,100 miles driven. We've got a total top line of 23,750 over those 29 days. That's an average of $818 per day. After expenses, which really is just factoring in fuel on this sort of on this thing, I don't figure in any long-term expenses or any fixed expenses. So our bottom line would be $668 per day after we pay for fuel and factoring. I don't have a lease fee because I have my own authority. And then this is probably the most important one everyone's looking at. This is what I've produced all miles with my deadhead. Would be $2.14 per mile. So down here we look at, I've got fuel broken up several different ways. I've paid an average of $2.93 per gallon. Now this was May 2nd through June 2nd. So fuel during that period of time, all 1,200 gallons of it, averaged out to $2.93 per gallon. Now I have pretty good discount programs for fuel, so if you guys aren't getting that, don't freak out. That's pretty low. I think I might have averaged, I want to say I averaged like 46 cents off per gallon advertised price. So like I said, I've got pretty good fuel discount programs. And cost per mile is 32 cents per mile for fuel. And then this is an interesting number down here. Fuel as a percentage of revenue. So 15.2% of my revenue, 15.2% of this number, 23,750, went towards fuel. This number here is my deadhead miles. This is my total deadhead. If you look over here, my deadhead percentage is 16.44%. That's kind of high. And the reason is because I did a lot of short hauls. So as we go shorter length of haul, our deadhead increases. So what I like to do is in my miles over here, I just subtract out the 1825 for miles, and that gives us right here, it gives us our average loaded per mile, right? Average rate per mile loaded, which is 256 per mile. So that means out of all the loads I've moved, which are all of these, let's see, there's 13 loads that I moved. I averaged $2.56 per loaded mile. That's an interesting number. because that means I beat the average a little bit, because the average was 217 for um, and all those load boards will figure a loaded mile. They don't know how much you're going to deadhead, so they don't figure that in. And then one thing that I thought was interesting, when you look at, I broke this down. This is every single load, and these are loaded miles. This is the rate of that load paid, and this is the rate per mile that load paid. So Portland to Missoula paid $3.65 a mile, and then St. Mary's to Nebraska paid $1.57. Nebraska to Georgia paid $1.65. Alabama to Macon, Georgia paid $4.26, and so on and so forth. So the interesting thing that I wanted to point out, I point this out every time, but it's worth pointing out. When we look at what Brett Hutto always says on the truck stop numbers, and the reason I don't use truck stop numbers, the reason I always use DAT numbers, is because truck stop numbers are always flawed. Maybe not flawed so much, but they don't really report what we think they're reporting. And what truck stop always reports is average posted rate. So in other words, what truck stop is always posting is this number here, the rate per mile posted for loaded miles, right? So it would be all of these numbers averaged together. So let's do that real quick. We're going to do this here. We're going to select them all. This gives us our sum down here, gives us the total count, and this gives us our average. So this means that I did an average of $3.12 per loaded mile, or that would be my average posted rate. So the average posted rate that I ran for was $3.12 per mile. Yet when we take the deadhead miles and we subtract it out like we did before, we get 256, not 312. So that's why I don't believe that average posted rate is worth a dang, because the only way it would be accurate is if we only run the average length of haul on the load board. So let's say the average length of haul is 400 miles. If we only pull loads 400 miles, then the average posted rate would be about accurate. But if you look here, the miles, we did almost 600 mile run for almost $4 a mile, but then next we did a 1,371 mile run for $1.50. So they don't have the same weight. When we do the average on those, the average on those two is 261, but they're not weighted the same, because this one's double the miles. So that's something I wanted to point out that I thought was pretty interesting, and it happens every time. Is, we can't look at the average posted rate. It works much better to look at the DAT number, which is the average line haul rate, a 217. That ends up being quite similar to what I can do with my deadhead. Now I know technically I did 256 loaded mile, but I had a lot of loads here that wouldn't have been on the chart. This wouldn't have been on the chart, this one, because remember, the DAT only reports loads that are 550 miles or more. So all of these short hauls wouldn't have been on the report. So ironically, the shortest loads you run are always the highest paying loads, right? I guess this would be the shortest load I ran. It's always the highest paying load, so, as far as a rate per mile goes. So it always would work out to where when you do longer length of haul, your rate per mile goes down. So what I like to do is I like to look at this number, the DAT number. That puts me at a much better spot for doing budgets. If I do budgets off of truck stops numbers, I'm gonna think I have all this money and I can spend a bunch of money, and then yet once I bring deadhead in, once I bring long length of hauls in, it comes down. So that is my most recent full hitch, and we can look at the hitch I'm on currently that isn't completed. This is an incomplete hitch, but this is what I've done so far. And this is pretty depressing on the rate per mile, but it's because we haven't completed it yet. So again, if you look down here at the rate, we left the house for $1.58, then we got $2.58, going down to Florida with 3 stops. And then we're currently, let's see, we're currently on this load right now for 284. And this is the rate that I did this one a little different. This one is where I was with the deadhead after delivering this load for $1.58 loaded. This was with deadhead. And then this was after I delivered that one with deadhead. So you see I'm moving up. We were at $1.23 by the time I delivered in Wichita, Kansas. And then by the time I delivered in Florida, we were up to $1.80. And then by the time I deliver the load I'm on currently, I'll be up, I'll be down a little bit. And then by the time I deliver the next load that I already have booked, I'll be back up again. So if I do a couple more loads, I'll be back up over $2 a mile by the time I get 2 or 3 more loads in. Or this is Sunday, so by the time I get midway next week, I'll be up over $2 a mile. But we always take a pretty big hit leaving the house because I live in Wyoming. And so I always have to figure, you know, the load leaving is going to be pretty poor, and I always have to boost it up with some good loads before I head home. So if I do a short hitch, my rate will be pretty bad. Right now we're looking at $1.92 by the time I get that one delivered, which is the one I haven't even picked up yet. So anyway, that is the some spreadsheet talk and kind of how I look at my numbers, what I like to see. In the flatbed market, we are looking for, you know, over $2 a mile. We've been able to maintain that most of the time. Jeff's last hitch, I made some mistakes, and you know, we kind of did some things we had to do to get him in a, you know, home at a certain time, and we actually got under $2 a mile for his hitch, but it was a short hitch. It was only like a 10-day hitch or something like that. So, and that happens as we do shorter hitches. We end up doing less dollar per mile because we can't stay in the hot market. Both him and I live in bad markets. So when we go home, we take a hit, and then we take a hit coming back. And then we get down into the good market, into the south. Again, let's look at that map. So, you know, I live in Wyoming, and Jeff lives in North Idaho, way up here. That's cut off. Up by Spokane. I guess he lives in Spokane. So, when we leave these markets, we take a pretty bad rate. But then once we get down here, we want to hang around down here in the red, you know, be bopping around, get our rate up, and then head back. And so we're always kind of coming in and out of bad markets because we live in bad markets. If you lived in Nashville, if you lived somewhere in Alabama, and you could do week after week after week in the red, you could potentially do, let's see, what could you do? Let's see here. This would be an interesting number. So let's look at by the time I dropped a load in Georgia, picked in Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina. Okay, let's kind of go through here and find out where we were still about right here. So unfortunately, we're going to do average posted rate. I just got done saying how I don't like to do this, but we're going to do that. So 361 per mile is what you might be able to do if you didn't live in a bad market. If I lived in Birmingham, Alabama, I might be able to see an average posted rate of 361, which means I probably would be able to get about 270 or 260 all in with deadhead, maybe 250. So that's what you might be able to produce with a flatbed if you're able to live in a hot market and stay in that hot market all the time. So anyway, that's pretty much all I wanted to show. Kind of the way I look at it, the way I have to think about it because of where I live and where Jeff lives, my driver. We have to kind of double up on staying in the hot market and then take a load to get the driver home and that sort of thing. So let me know what you guys are producing out there. I've been on days off for a while, so I'm not really sure what the market's like. Other than the last 3 loads I've booked for myself were pretty standard. It doesn't seem like it's changed much since when I went on days off. So let me know what you guys are seeing in the flatbed market. Let me know if you guys are producing better than 214 a mile all miles. You should be, unless you live somewhere I do. So let me know.